Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Tina again with Parent Like a Pro. And I don't know if I've mentioned it so far in this summit, but I am really passionate about relationships. And I really believe that the quality of our lives depend on the quality of our relationships. And I know how some of you are struggling with the relationship towards your child, your teenager, or even you wonder how your not so good relationship towards your parents might affect the relationship towards your child. And therefore, I am so happy and excited to have someone who passionately believes in the power of relationships, Dr. Jody Carrington. She is a clinical psychologist and just wrote a book, Kids These Days, and I am really curious what she is writing in this book. Hello, Dr. Jody. How are you?
I'm great, Dr. Tina. Thanks for having me all the way from Canada.
And hello from Slovenia. It's a pleasure having you.
It's an honor. When you asked me, I could not believe it. So I'm so excited to talk to you today about all those things you love. I love them too.
Amazing. So just for a start, tell us something about yourself, your book, and just inspire us with your story.
All right, I'm ready. All right. Well, I grew up in a small town, a rural town in Alberta, Canada. And actually, you know what? It was a teacher who inspired me. I remember in grade 10, so we started really small. There's 20 of us that started out in kindergarten together, and many of the same of us were still together into high school. And in grade 10, the most popular kid in our class was killed. And I remember where Mrs. Nordstrom was standing when she told us about Neil. I remember what she was wearing. I have no idea what she said, but I remember how she made us feel. And I went home that day and I said to my dad, I know what I want to do with the rest of my life. I want to make people feel the way Mrs. Nordstrom made us feel. And it started this journey where I don't really like kids. I'm a child psychologist now. I'm not a huge fan of kids. I own 3 of myself, so for myself, I'm coming around a little. But I really thought my whole career was going to be focused on adults and influencing their relationships. And when I was doing my PhD, I did an externship with child and adolescent mental health. And I had spent some time doing some work with trauma before that. And I realized we know nothing about kids and trauma. And so I took my first job at the Alberta Children's Hospital. So it's one of the centers of excellence here in our province. And you know, it broke my heart. You'll appreciate this as a pediatrician. The big approach to helping these babies who were struggling so significantly was to lock them up on an inpatient unit and reward them for their good behavior and punish them for their bad behavior. And the hope is we could take away enough stuff from a kid to make them be kind. Yeah. So here I was, this green psychologist, stunned by the fact that we didn't take into account relationship and connection, but we did everything from a behavioral perspective. And here's the scary thing about that. We base this at the center of excellence, this way we approach kids and families, on what we learned from a rat. So in 1942, Skinner and Watson were sitting around saying, like, how do we influence children? And they were like, look what happens when we shock a rat. It stops doing what we don't want it to do. And when we feed it colored water, it does more of it. And they, at the time, were like, well, look how good let's do this with children. And now, which is ridiculous, you know, because we know kids are so different than rats, but listen, behavioral interventions work. If I have a big enough motivator, I can make you do anything. If I know something that's powerful for you, I can make you do anything. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't allow you to be kind. It doesn't create connection and relationship. And so we started having these conversations because so many parents said to me as a child psychologist, I can't take away enough stuff from my kid to make them be kind. I've taken away their iPad, their iPod, their time with their friends. I've taken their door off their room because they keep slamming it. And they're still not making good choices. Wow, I wonder where they're learning that from.
Yeah.
And so we started talking about relationship and connection. And what was really interesting to me is after I sort of finished my time there, I was old. We started having kids of our own. So we have an 8-year-old now and 6-year-old twins. But at 38, I was a mom of three little babies, all under 2. And so I started a private practice at consulting with schools. And it was amazing to me how some of the babies who struggled the most were all on behavioral intervention programs. We had parents really lost with their own kids, trying to figure out what they could do to help them be kind. And they were taking things away, and they were trying to sort of punish them into being to making good choices, and they were feeling so incompetent as parents.
Yeah.
Right. Started talking a lot about relationships and connection and who their kids reminded them of. And you know, it's interesting to me, the most important thing that I've learned in this process is that so many people say to me, I don't know what the sort of feeling is in Europe, but we just need to get back to the good old days. What we're missing is discipline with children. They are lazy and disrespectful and all of these things these days. Kids these days is a problem.
Yeah.
You know, what's interesting to me is I've assessed and treated over 1,000 kids in this country, and I've never met a bad kid.
Yeah.
Not one time.
Yeah.
And what we want for our kids is for them to make good choices and to be able to be kind. And the only way you show them how to do those things is in the context of relationship. You can't tell a kid how to regulate emotion. And so when I was asking, you know, I started speaking with schools and different parents about, you know, the most important thing, if you own a kid or teach a kid, is to teach them this thing called emotional regulation. And they were, what does that mean? It's how really not to lose your friggin' mind. If you can teach your kid how not to lose their mind in times of distress, they have the capacity to be kind and to get good grades and to have relationships and to make good choices. All those things we want for our kids. Here's the problem. You can't tell a kid how to regulate emotion. You got to show them. And so we spend a lot of time telling kids to calm down and to make good choices. But I don't know, like the last time your husband said to you, just calm down, how well that worked. You know, never in the history of telling somebody how to regulate emotion does regulating emotion work. So we never, you know, when my husband says to me, calm down, my response usually is like, I'll show you calm. You want to see calm?
Exactly.
And kids respond the way. So you can't tell a kid how to be calm. You got to show them. And so when we bring our babies home from the hospital, they only have one way to show us what they need. They lose their friggin' minds. They cry, right? They go into fight or flight until we can help them soothe. So again and again, we, and we regulate again and again and again, 0 to 2 so many times, we show them how to do it. And if I do that enough in my physical presence with my babe, they will require it less from me or other people when I'm not with them. And so it is, the context of relationship becomes so critical. And we are at this crossroads in our culture right now where we have never, ever been more disconnected. And we're under this false understanding that, I mean, you and I can connect from Canada to Slovenia in one click. And so we think we're so connected. But the issue is what we are losing is proximity. And if you think about the square footage of the house in which your grandfather was raised, and the square footage of the house in which we raise our babies, there's a significant difference. And so our grandparents had the luxury, if you will, of being face to face all the time with people who they loved. And they didn't have iPhones or TVs at the end of the day. They actually had to sit down together and play cards. Or, you know, my father lived in sort of a 1-bedroom house with 2 brothers. And so every night they would fold out the couch, sleep there, and fold it up in the morning. So if you got pissed off with your brother or you got in a fight, you had to figure it out. I hate you too, good night. And now we send our kids to their rooms, we disconnect, we text them when it's supper time. And there's something physiologically that happens in your body when you're face to face with another human being, particularly somebody you love. Your cortisol decreases, your oxytocin and your dopamine increase, and that cannot be replicated on a text or an email. And you cannot tell a kid how to regulate emotion. You got to show them. And so the more disconnected we become, we all carry devices. We all, at the end of the day, would much rather sink into a TV show than we would having a conversation with our partner, because relationship and connection is so much harder to do than taking a really easy exit ramp of watching a show or even, you know, sort of listening to a podcast. All of those things we have at the ready. and there are disconnection off ramps, and that's the biggest problem our babies are facing. Kids these days aren't the problem. Kids these days have as many hopes and dreams and plans as you and I did. But our parents also really worried about us. I don't know if they say this in Slovenia, but they say this all the time. You don't know how good you have it.
Yeah.
Back in the day, we uphill both ways to school. Yeah. No shoes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Like, so you're so spoiled. You are. Yeah. Lazy.
Every generation that comes before us is very concerned about the next generation because you have no idea. And it's the truth, and it's actually the point. We don't want our babies to know what we've had to live through. I hope our kids see a day where pancreatic cancer isn't a death sentence. I hope they see a day where, we know how they get to school, and that we know they're there safely without a doubt. Like, I hope medical and technological advances allow us that luxury. But the biggest thing we are missing in this process is staying physically connected with the people we love.
Yeah. And this connection, as you said, like, it's so important also in the early childhood development. We know how important it is to get this eye-to-eye contact, how to attach to a child. And we know, and I know you know even better than myself, how important this is if the baby misses this out, if there is no this initial connection, and how important it is to really do it, and how easy in a way it was, before in I don't know how many years ago when they were living. And sometimes when I hear those stories, how many people were actually in a small room, and they had to live together. They had to manage that. It's so important. And today I was just talking with a nurse who is actually and just kind of now went through my mind, is this connection. And she said, she's working at the drug addiction center. And she said that, I don't know how come we were just talking about gypsies, and there was this, back-to-back campaign where the babies were they were put back to to sleep on their backs or on their side, because not on the stomachs, because of the this infant death syndrome and sudden infant death syndrome, and it wasn't observed by gypsies. And the first thing it was because gypsies still, so those who are in a way, living together, they are still loads of them. And the whole family sleeps in one bed. So what's most important thing for this young child not to go into sudden infant death syndrome is to be constantly in a way stimulated, so that the respiratory center doesn't in a way fall asleep, so to say. So it wasn't observed by gypsies, and they realized, because if there is so many people in one bed, they are being constantly stimulated, and they have to move. And today, what just she told me was, what's the most interesting thing, that no gypsies ever have a drug addiction problem. And she is working there for, I think, almost 30 years now. And she said, I've never seen a gypsy who would have this problem. And she said, and I know this is because of the attachment, because they are being kind of together, and they have this early on attachment, because they are, as you said, making these contacts.
Well, you know what? We often talk about it here lately, and I do a lot of connection around these things. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection.
Yeah.
And it really is that sense of like, I'm going to numb it. I'm going to fill it with something. And so we spend a lot of time in our North American culture anyway, really setting up people to be sober and to provide them lots of opportunities on how to get clean. But what we sometimes fail to do is, how do we fill that void with a connection? And so we put them on 12-step programs, all of those kind of things. And we find that the most significant intervention is whether you get a sponsor who is connected to you. Because as with kids, it only takes one. The only thing a kid needs to develop in a healthy way, Yuri Bronfenbrenner said this in 1952. He was a German who started the American Head Start program in 1952. And he said, the only thing a kid needs to develop in a healthy way is first, last, and always somebody needs to be crazy about them.
Oh, yeah.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing. You and I talked a little bit off air, but it takes a village to raise a child. And oftentimes us parents are exhausted and we're doing our best with our kids and we're not going to show up all the time. We're going to lose our friggin' minds when we're tired and the kids are sassing and all of those things are happening. So how do we have a village in our communities where that I'll light up around your baby? Because your baby comes through my door and says, hey, is there snacks? I will say to your baby, oh, honey, yes, come here.
Mm-hmm.
And my baby says to me, Mom, is there a snack? I'll say, listen,
Mm-hmm.
you don't speak to me like that. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So we're so much better with other people's children.
Yeah, why is that? Yeah.
we have less skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I am not, have you noticed this too? Grandparents are often better with their children.
Yeah.
And so have you ever looked at your parents and thought like, where the hell were you when I was growing up?
Yeah.
Now you're all awesome? Like,
yeah.
what? Because when we have less skin in the game, I can, as an educator or with my best friend's children, be so much more tolerant because I stay regulated when they're distressed. When my babies get distressed or when they are inappropriate or unkind, I get dysregulated. So I sort of flip my prefrontal cortex a little bit, get a bit upset, and I'm like, hey. And when I do that, they lose somebody who can regulate them. So this idea of us being, great with our kids is so awful. Like we're going to screw it up for sure. That is our personal job. There's some data out of the US that says if we can stay connected to our kids 30% of the time, help them regulate 30% of the time, that is enough on board to be able to teach them how to regulate emotion.
Mm-hmm.
You can screw this stuff up 70% of the time. And if you have a solid relationship with educators, particularly when they're in adolescence,
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much dysregulation happening in adolescence and they're spending so much more time with educators and coaches and their friends, who in their world is really connected to them? And sometimes it isn't their parents that are the number one. Yeah. Do they have a coach who they want to impress and who they want to sort of inspire or are inspired by? So when their coaches say, hey, dude, come here. Let's talk about how you were speaking about your girlfriend yesterday. Mm-hmm. When we were driving to the volleyball tournament, I heard you speaking like this. That's not okay by me.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to have a lot of influence. So how do we build that sense of like everybody in a community has these babies, right? And this is, I think what you're finding with the gypsies, right, is that, I have your back. I watch your baby. You watch mine. I coach. We play hockey here all the time. And so I coach a group of 8-year-olds. Mm-hmm. And when they have hard times, I mean, they'll come in and say like, Coach Jody, what do I do? And I have all the tolerance in the world to hold their babies. And we sort of have this agreement that you light up around my kids and I light up around yours. And that's how we raise healthy babes, right?
Yeah.
The more right? I mean, it's so fantastic. And so how do we think about speaking the language with our educators? Because I do a lot of work with teachers. In North America, our educators spend more waking hours with our children than their parents do. And if the only thing that matters for kids at the end of the day, curriculum is solid. We have got literacy and numeracy down, right? Do not doubt. But what we don't do a very good job of is looking after our educators. And here's the deal. Our kids are only okay if we're okay. As a child psychologist, I can keep your kid in therapy till they're 65. But if I send them home to a war zone every night, if I send them home, if I send them into an education, they matter or important or are loved on in any capacity, our kids don't stand a chance.
Yeah, that's true. But how do we solve this problem? Okay, we have to take care in a way of educators and really try to, in a way, enlighten them as much as we can and really start teaching them, how to be, because this connection really is very important. But what can we do as parents? How can we connect more? How can we, build these wonderful relationships? What can we do? Because I always, as you said, how the great grandparents are being so great now. And I always thought maybe because, they're not working, some of them are not working, they're at home, they have so much, in a way so much time, and they don't need to cope with this stressful situation so much. That was kind of my self-talk. Maybe this is it, because they are just having, they're just having this child for maybe 3 or 4 hours, but I have to go to work, I have to be a mom, I have to think what I'm going to buy, and et cetera, et cetera. So what can we do to be better, and and I have another sub question, how not to, in order to be better and connect better, how, because another thing comes up right now is, in order to do that, we are all then striving to be this perfect parent, and then we're having this vicious cycle of, not, in a way, having always the feeling that we are failing our child in a way. And this is so common here right now.
Sure. So there's 2 things that I want to answer about that. So you had mentioned, I just wrote a book called Kids These Days. I can't believe I wrote a friggin' book, but so here it is. And
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I will, I'm going to tell you 5 things that I talk about in there that I just want to remind your parents about, that they know. You already know this as a parent. If you have ever loved on a kid or been loved, this is not going to rock your world. You know this, but I'm going to just get you back to 5 of the basics that cost nothing and that you already own. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how we look after you, because you have so much more access to these 5 things if you feel confident and filled up, and like you're actually making a difference in your baby's life. Okay. So the first thing that matters so much, and this is so easy, but you show genuine interest in things they love. And here's the thing, with our little guys, we are often so exhausted and so tired. We don't want to get down and, learn about Paw Patrol or Minecraft or, whatever the frig the thing, Baby Shark. Do they sing this in your?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Paw Patrol. Paw Patrol. I know that.
I mean, I know Sky and I know them all.
Marshall, Zuma. I know them. See,
look at, you're such a good mom.
Oh yeah.
But when you can speak their language, they light up. And there's often we're so concerned about screen time with our kids, but I got to tell you, that's their jam. So what I love is you play it with them. Our son is he's 8 and he's so much into Pokemon Go, which is an app you have on your phone and you got to catch stuff that's not there. Okay. And for such a long time, I'm like, no, you cannot have my phone. We are out on a family walk. No, pay attention to your dad. Look at me. We're a connected family. And then I thought, you know what? Like, I got to show interest in the things he loves. He wants to catch these friggin' Pokemon things. So we spent 2 hours one day walking around our town, catching these things. And I am like on people's decks. I'm in bushes. I'm catching these things. And you should have saw the joy, right? And he's telling me things. And so it's like, if I can collect and connect with him, then I have so much capacity to direct. So after we've done that thing, I can say, okay, dude, it's off now. Let's go back. We got some things to do. Right. Yeah. And I have somebody so much more directable. When they hit adolescence, the hard part is it gets more and more difficult to light up around the things they love, because most of the things they love are illegal. Huh? So it becomes really, hard to be like, yeah, let's go smoke.
Yeah.
But what we got to think about is like, teach me about your music, right? All kids in North America, I have earbuds and they are always listening to the stuff that they love, and it's usually inappropriate and full of swear words. And so what really becomes interesting is when parents can say, like, let me hear what you're listening to. Like, without empathy means I can withhold judgment just for a second and be like, wow. And so when they give the earbuds to you and you can say, no, listen, I really want to hear what you're listening to. And when you don't put it in your ear because you'll get a disease, but if you just put it by your ear, you're going to hear something that sounds like this, like, mother. And this is what you're going to do. You're going to go like this. And you're going to say, wow, is there lyrics? This is, come on. And when you sort of engage in the things that they love, you get to them. And so social media is such a big piece. And, you get them to teach it to you. Show me how to do the snap face or the Insta chat. And then they're like, oh my God, Mom, it's Instagram. And you're like, what? Show me.
Yeah, amazing.
And so it really is that piece that if you meet them where they're at, you have so much more influence. And I think we get just so concerned about Toni Morrison said this once, you know, when we look at them, we think that we're checking, are they dressed appropriately? That's how we show our love, right? Do you have this? Do you have your lunch? Do you have all those things? What they see when they look at your face is the critical face.
Yeah.
What they want to see is the light up and the engagement first. And then we teach, and then we care, and then we do all those things. When I light up, just to know that you matter to me, so my first look at you is like this. Then I say, okay, Tina, do you have your lunch packed?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't want you to go hungry today.
Mm-hmm.
We often miss that middle step of just the delight, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we show genuine interest in the things they love, even if it's something we are not super jacked about? We often have a lot more influence if we sort of seek from a place. Stephen Covey said this: if I seek to be understand before being understood. Can you teach me a little bit about what it's like to be 15 and so crazy in love with the headbanging, smash your head in music?
Yeah.
Right. So that's number one. And then the second thing that I really love, you had already spoke about it, is eye contact. We are so disconnected these days that what we don't do, we look all the time, but we don't see. Mm-hmm. So when you come home and after a long day of work, I mean, my babies are there, but I'm often so busy of like, whose boots are these, and who's making supper, and who didn't let the dog? Mm-hmm. And I don't even see my children. You know, when you've been with your husband every day of every week, and then have you ever noticed this? And you look at him, really, you see him like on a weekend or at Christmas, and you're like, gee, holy moly, you're old.
I love you.
You know?
It's so amazing. Yeah.
Right? Like, you're like, wow, how did that happen? Because we have so much distraction and so much easier things. Like, I often say this, I think Netflix is the demise of all marriages, because like, I'm on season 8 of Grey's Anatomy. And at the end of the day, after I've like talked 3 kids off of a ledge, after I've launched my book, worked with 10 employees, raised my 3 children, and tried to get supper ready, the last thing I want to do is talk to my husband about taxes or who's taking who to hockey practice. I'm just like, I have earned the right to watch Alex Karev. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So don't talk to me. And because Alex Karev is hotter than my personal husband, and he doesn't talk back. So what I risk is the disconnect from my husband. I don't even look at him to realize, like, oh, he looks super tired, or I missed this when he said to me, you know, I lost 3. He feeds cows for a living. He's a feedlot nutritionist, and so, you know, we have very different interests, and so I don't want to talk about cows and how much salt you have in a ration, but that's his love. And when I don't get his eyes, I miss all of those things, right? And so even just sort of that in the back of our mind as we're, you know, in our communities getting coffee, the drive-through coffee, or being able to look at the kid serving you to say, like, hey, good morning, Jamie, thanks so much for this. Yeah. I get his prefrontal cortex when I do that. I pull him back into connection, and that's how I change the world. Right? One sweet babe at a time. When I get into an elevator, instead of checking my phone, I look at the person and say, you know, it's a nice day out there today. Hey, or, you know, how about those Oilers, you know, whatever the deal is. We don't do that enough because we have the exit ramp of disconnect, and that's way easier. Yeah. So this thing of eye contact will change everything. You watch it. If you were to come home tomorrow, let's just say, or even tonight, your husband walks through the door tonight and you go like this to him. Hi, look, come here. I don't know if I tell you this enough, but you matter to me, right? Or my mother was wrong. You were the best choice I've ever made. I mean, what would they say?
Yeah, they would be amazed or surprised, at least.
My husband always says to me, "What did you buy?"
What did you buy? You're
right?
Amazing.
Right? And the thing is, the people we love the most are suspicious when we're kind.
Yeah. And when you're touching them, and yeah. Just the other day I had the talk with my husband, and I was like, you know, we really need to be more like he said, like, hello, honey, how are you? Just, you know, this in a way silly, you know, kind of this cheesy talk, something, because it really kind of connects you, and it makes you touch the other person, almost like it would be talking to a small baby or a child. We all do that. Why do we stop doing this when the child goes older, and to our towards our spouse? So that we just had, like, I think it was two weeks ago, I had this conversation with him, and at first he was like, okay, does it really kind of does it mean a lot to you? And I say, yeah, because you change, your energy change, and I love when you are like I'm someone you would like to, in a way, cuddle. It's just like cuddling on a small baby, and
Totally.
and this really kind of, it changes, everything changes, your perspective changes, everything changes, and this really is one of the most important things. And also our children, when we are in a way connected and going to, what I see a lot of times is that parents are not lowering their their view, eye contact to eye contact, so to go to the level of their children at the same level. This really is also, it's also disconnecting. But a lot of parents would say, and a lot of people would say, like, I just need that, as you said, I just need this 1 hour at night just to go, I don't know, on Facebook or watch Grey's Anatomy, because I don't need to talk to no one. I really have so many contacts during the day, and working, especially people who are working with people, this is so stressful that I really need to, in a way, they're saying, disconnect. I need to be, in a way, by myself. I don't need to think, everything is just happening and I'm being, in a way, by myself. But it's quite the opposite, right? And I am a kind of person who really loves to go to sit for a cup of coffee and just talk, and not just go on. And I do have Facebook and everything, but I really love to go with a friend and have, I don't know, this lunch, and then I have to pick up my kid and she has to pick up hers. But just to have this 1 hour for ourselves, not to go on Facebook, but to connect, because it's so much, it's fulfilling, and it feels great when you have these connections.
And we're wired for it. So I often talk about this in the book. We're wired to do hard things, and so anything that you have on your plate right now, and listen, I've sat in front of parents that have lost their children, buried their children. I've sat in front of people who 30 years, they're in the middle of a divorce, stage 4 cancer. We're wired for all of it. I mean, it's shitty, it's awful, we're wired for all of it. And here's the truth: we are also wired for connection. And we can get through those hard things so much easier when we remember that we are wired for connection. Because the first thing we tend to do when hard things come is a very primitive response, but it's to disconnect. We're good. We're fine. We got it. And it actually takes this sort of physical, and now we're in this culture where it's so easy to just disconnect, not talk, avoid. Even, in the state of grief, you think about it, when our parents grew up, if somebody died down the road, you'd go. You'd take food and you'd go. And now we have we'll just text them. Oh, we don't want to, do we bring the meatballs or the buns? Oh God, they might have the gluten allergy. I don't know what you say to somebody who's buried their husband. You know what? I'll just go when things calm down. Yeah. You didn't have that luxury before. You just went. Yeah. And that was the most important part of grief and mourning, is how we connect through it, how we all sit through it. And now the epitome of you listen, you're born to grieve. We're all wired for grief. It's the great equalizer. You have to show people how to mourn. And your babies, you used to watch your parents mourn because they would take you with them up the road when somebody died. You would be at their feet when they were laughing and crying and singing and drinking and eating together in the first 2 or 3 days after a tragedy. The babies were at the feet watching. Right? And now we often say, we don't really, the kids might be too old, young to bring to a funeral. We don't want them to be at the service. We don't want them to see dead people. That is, if you're old enough to love, you're old enough to grieve. And how I show you how to mourn is the greatest gift I can give a child. How I show them how to regulate, how I show them how to apologize. None of those things you're born with. It must occur in face-to-face connection. It must occur in relationship. And kids don't learn from people who they think don't like them.
Yeah, and they don't learn, and then sometimes they grow up and they just don't know what they're feeling, and they just don't know how to cope with certain situations and emotions, and this is one of the most dramatic things. And with
And you know
which
what? Here's the cool thing. If you have parents who are watching it, it's never too late.
mm-hmm.
You know, if you have a 13-year-old or you're watching this with an 18-year-old or a 24-year-old and you're thinking, gosh, he loses his mind over everything and he won't even talk to me, he won't even speak to me. Some of these basic things mean, you know, you had also said getting down on their level. Gathering kids, gathering family, gathering people with food is really critical. And I'll tell you why. It's the number 4 thing I talk about, because you can't chew and be angry. You have to be regulated. Your prefrontal cortex has to be on in order to swallow. And what I want is food really allows you to come back into connection. So as a behavioral method, we often use food as a reward. You pee on the potty, you get a Smartie. You read these 3 books, you get to choose from the treat bin. That's not what food was intended for.
Mm-hmm.
We're using that as we would do with a dog. You do a good choice, you get a treat.
Mm-hmm.
With a child, with our partners, we want to say, come here, look at me, let's have a sip of water. Come on, let's have a snack, and then we'll teach. So if I've had a kid who's just told me to F off or flip the table or is so upset, it flies in the face of all behavioral reason to be able to say, come on, right? Let's have a drink of water. Let's have a cookie. Because from a behavioral perspective, it appears as though we're reinforcing that or rewarding that off of behavior.
Yeah.
But I can't teach you if you're dysregulated. I can have the best speech prepared, the largest consequence on the planet. And if my babies are disconnected or dysregulated, they cannot learn because they're all limbic system, right? They're all primitive part of their brain. I need the prefrontal cortex back on, this part right here, before I can teach you. And the quickest way I get you is if I give you a snack or some water. That's not the end game. I got to get you quiet and regulated, and then I teach.
Yeah.
So the big mistake we make is we get kids quiet, not calm. So I'm going to get you quiet, and then I'm going to teach you.
Amazing. But how do we master our self-regulation? You know, when we are busy at work, stressed, coming at home, and, you know, we're having a toddler or toddler twins. And you just, you know, and I know a lot of moms are asking me, you know, I'm working from, I don't know, a 9-to-5 job. And I just need to relax. I just don't know how to cope with it, you know, just to go and play with them. And you know, because I have the feeling that I'm not able to relax. And then I don't know how to self-regulate because I'm just losing my mind. How do we do that?
Totally. So there's a few things I want you to think about, or I want your listeners to think about. The most vulnerable emotion on the planet. Do you know what that is?
No,
not a test. It's not a test. You have to get to it. It's joy.
Is it?
And so if you are, I often say to people who are struggling significantly with their family or their kids, when is the last time you belly laughed with your babies? When is the last time you danced in your kitchen? Because see, when you're in joy, you are at the sort of will of the world. And so we often, if I leave you to your own devices, you'll dress rehearse tragedy. You will say things like, this is awful. I just wait for it. It's coming. It's going to get bad. When we wake up in the morning, our first thought usually isn't things like, gosh, I am so lucky. I'm so glad I married this guy snoring beside me. God, I love being a mom. Shit, I should have had more kids. Like, I'm so glad I can't get into my pants. Birthing the children was so worth the 35 extra pounds. Like, we don't think like that. We often dress rehearse for all the bad stuff that's going to happen. And practicing choosing joy. People hate when I say this, but it is a choice.
It is a choice.
I have to step into this and look for the things, seek and you will find all of the things that actually are okay. So this idea of practicing gratitude, sweet Lord, it's like practicing spirituality or practicing a basketball shot or a running routine, golf swing. The more you practice it, the better you get at it. And if you don't, you lose your skill. So this idea of how do I seek for joy, even in the day, how do I find a belly laugh moment with my kids? How do I look at the kids that I'm teaching or parenting and think like, you know what? That's amazing that you can do that.
Mm.
Even when I sit with parents who just buried their children, even when I sit with parents who, are, or people who are fighting chronic illnesses,
Mm.
I say to them, joy is a choice. And they're like, you don't understand what it is like. And you're like, I say 150%, I haven't buried my child, God forbid.
Yeah.
But I know that it becomes a choice where we need to focus on the things that we still have. So this idea of practicing gratitude and joy is one thing. The other thing I really want you to think about, or to consider, Tina, is this idea of who catches you when you fall. Who are 3 or 4 people in your world who I like to talk about as your bottom hands, who sort of lift you up. And listen, what's very clear about this to me is that we often say it's our kids, our husband. I want you to think bigger than that. I want you to think who inspires you, who do you want to make proud, and they can be alive or dead. And so for me, I'll just give you some examples of my bottom hands. It's my brother, what is one. So we obviously grew up together. And as we launched this book, he was often in my corner. He knows my story, but he's very quiet. He's often critical. Jode, you're too loud. You're too much. Like, you should try to just simmer down a little. When he sat with me after we launched this book and he met my team and, he grabbed my hand. I don't think he's ever grabbed my hand. He's a 40-year-old man. And he said to me, I am so proud of you. Of all the accolades that I've got over the many years, that's how I knew I'm doing something right. Mm-hmm. Because he's a man of integrity and a man of character. And when he can say that to me, I know I'm on the right track. The second bottom hand for me is a guy, my grandfather. He's been dead for 10 years. And Jack Carrington stood 5'3". He fought in the Second World War. He was gregarious and kind. And when he would dance with my grandmother, they floated. Mm. And I often thought as a little girl, if I could find a relationship like that, I would be halfway home. And I often think about when the critics come, so there's often lots of opinions about how I parent or how I show up, whether I swear too much or how I show up in this world. I think about what he would say. And I sort of had this conversation with him in my head, and I know he would say, Jody, are you chasing your dreams? Are you showing your babies how to chase their dreams? And I would say, yes, sir. And he would say, do you think you're making a difference in the world? And I would say, yes, sir. Mm-hmm. And say, are you showing your babies how a strong woman should be? And I would say, yes, sir. And then he would say, are you being kind to your husband? And I would say, I mean, like, I feel like 3 out of 4 isn't bad. But, I speak only to him, Tina. I wrote this book only to my bottom hands. The rest don't score. The rest don't score. You pick your 2 or 3. There's lots of opinions about how my stage presence, I often use profanity because, not to be offensive, but there's certain words in our language that demand attention. Mm-hmm. And this is something so deep in my heart that we need to be connected to our children and to our partners so that we can create this sense of reconnection in this world, that I will use words that make people listen. Yeah. And at the risk of offending, I'll take it any day. I've always walked a line. And so I pick my bottom hands, my 4 or 5 people who I know would be proud of that, and they would say, you go, girl. Your kids do not know how to chase their dreams unless you show them how to chase yours. Yeah. And when I feel filled up, I can give back to my husband like no other way. I can light up with my kids. Does it mean I don't lose my mind? Like every day, I'm doing my very best to stay in the game with my kids. But it's like, who matters the most to you? Play to them. The rest don't score. There's always going to be a critic. Pam 123 on Twitter is always going to have an opinion. Yeah. Do you understand?
Yeah, always. Yeah. And you don't care about them, and you shouldn't. I know. Yeah, you shouldn't. You just really, and this is so empowering and so really, profound what you just said, and it's in a way a perfect ending of this interview, because it's just I think to the point. You brought everything, this big mystery, how to behave, and how to really show your children how to chase their dreams. It's all about you. at the end of the day. And it's so amazing the way you're putting things. I don't know if I had this good laugh, just spontaneous laugh for a while now. And yeah, and I just remember the other day I was tickling my daughter, and then she started, tickle me back. And, I had this, I couldn't believe myself how I'm laughing, because I am ticklish as well. And, I was tickling her. She didn't do it back. And just the other day, we were literally on the floor crying, both of us, because we were just having so much fun. And this is just
beautiful.
Yeah. And I couldn't, almost like I would, step back and, in a way, viewing all this from a distance. I was amazed. She's 3 and I can laugh like from the bottom of my heart, like, this just laughter was just coming out and coming out and coming out. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I was surprised even that, I can have this with my 3-year-old. And, yeah, and with this, when these things happen, you just need to just forget about everything and just be there and enjoy. So Jody, thank you so much. And before we go, you prepared a little special gift for our parents and viewers out there. So tell us about it. And
yes. So remind me. So the book.
Yeah, no, the little special free gift we are offering for all of our viewers. You prepared something.
Yes, a video. Is that the thing you're talking about?
Yeah.
I love how we're just on the same page here.
Yeah.
Yes. So what I'm going to do is I will send you the link, and then you can share it with all of your viewers. There's 5 videos that we have that we'd love to sort of share with you, and you can just download it. And then any questions about the book, you can find us on Instagram and our website. And I'm so happy to share all of these things with you, because I think it's how we change the world.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for your generous gift. And thank you for sharing all this profound wisdom with all of us. And I really know everyone loved this interview, because the way you're explaining things is just amazing. I just love it. So thank you once again. And thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, who are following this series. I hope you have such a good time as I have. And if you have any questions, email me, tell me how I can serve you further. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.